Hello and welcome to Always Take Notes. In this episode, Kassia and I spoke to Nick Summers, who's a features editor at Bloomberg Businessweek magazine, and at the time we spoke to him was based in London.
We spoke to him about his role at Bloomberg Businessweek, how it fits into the wider Bloomberg offering, and also about some individual pieces that he had helped shepherd to publication, including one about an FBI informant and another about IBM.
We both really enjoyed it at the slightly intimidating Bloomberg HQ on Finsbury Square.
It wasn't that intimidating, it was full of free food.
Yeah, which we sampled. And as ever, we tried to get as much practical advice and useful snippets of information into this as possible. We hope you enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to Always Take Notes. We're here at the Bloomberg offices in London with Nick Summers. Nick, what's your official title?
That's a good question. I'm not sure we officially have official titles here, but I'm the features editor in London. Before that, I was in New York, and I'm actually moving back to New York in about a month.
Sure. And can you start just by telling us a bit about your background and your route and your entry into journalism?
Sure. It starts with my mom. My mom was a career, she was a lifer at the Washington Post. So I sort of grew up with a Post in the family, and I always wanted to have her job. And so, I worked in the high school newspaper, worked in the college newspaper, and there was really never any even just discussion in my head about any other career track. I went from Columbia to Newsweek as my first job. I was there for about 5 years, maybe 6, doing a lot of different things, but one of the last things was working on the 2008 presidential campaign, going around for a little more than a year with the various campaigns. I went to the New York Observer to write the media column pretty briefly, just for a few months, and then came back to Newsweek when it had merged with Tina Brown's Daily Beast, and was there for a year or two before coming to Businessweek in 2012.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to ask where in the recent iterations of Newsweek you'd fit it in there, but it seems like in both
there have been many iterations.
Regime and
I was sort of like traditional Newsweek where they let me go out on the campaign trail for like 15 months and just do pure reporting. I worked on this book project where your notes are actually kept secret from the rest of the magazine until they're published. You and several other team members is all published as a book, published 2 days after the election. And if you just think about like the scale of the commitment of for Newsweek to have 2 duplicate reporting teams, one reporting for the weekly magazine and another team reporting for this book project, it's just staggering. And then I was there for a very different Newsweek when it was sort of combined with a web startup. So I've been a few different places in this era of print journalism.
And how long have you worked for Businessweek?
So 2012 to now, it's 5 years and change. I was a staff writer for the first few years, and then switched over into editing in 2014, and I've been here for the last 2 years working out of London.
Okay, and is your role in America, in New York, going to be exactly the same as it is now, or is it sort of being changed slightly?
No, it's the same. We're a funny shop. I mean, there are writers in New York that have continued to edit since moving out here, and there are European-based writers who were edited out of New York. I've definitely met some new and very talented writers out here that I hope to keep working with after I go back to the States.
And has your interest here always been kind of in the sort of longer form features type pieces, or have you done other things?
It's always been long form. And Businessweek, that's one of the advantages of working there, is that it's one of the few remaining news weeklies to really invest in long pieces that require weeks or months or longer of reporting, and give writers the space they need to really tell those stories. We have pretty typical lengths, to 2,500, 3,000 words for most pieces, most weeks. But, if you really get a hold of something and want to go up to 10,000, the answer to that question can be yes. Getting extra pages in a magazine is often yes. There are a lot of resources here, and we try to make the most of them.
And in terms of your current role, could you talk a little bit about that in terms of how many pieces you're working on at any one time and what you do, really?
Yeah, it changes. I mean, on my desk I've got a really sophisticated system of Post-it notes, which is in sort of 3 stacks, like one, each Post-it is a project in progress. The left column is sort of notional or imaginary. They've been greenlit, but the reporting is underway. It might go great, it might peter out. They just kind of exist. Some Post-its have been on that stack for quite a while. The middle stack is when copy is in and it's become real. There's actually something that I can really work on. And the third column is for drafts that have been accepted and are actually in the pipeline and in some stage of being, they're off my desk, they've moved on to a top editor, they've come back to my desk or they're on the way to galley, something like that. Sorry, very long answer to your question of, I was trying to picture that those columns have probably got 15 going right now, I would say, in various stages of completion.
I'm just going to, it's definitely Simon's turn to ask a question, but I'm just fascinated by the Post-it note thing. In this age of computers, you've got 3 columns of Post-it notes. How long have you been running this system? Is there a colour coding?
Should be said, Kassia is a fan of the Post-it note.
We have, pretty fancy, workflow software, but I don't know, the old-fashioned stuff is, I just like, there's something nice and tactile about it. And then just, you can also see, we use Trello for workflow, and there's this what's that word? Skeuomorphized. It's like when Apple designs an app, like a notepad app that looks like a notepad. It's when real life design elements are digitized. There's a feature in Trello where one of their cards will sort of get yellowed with age. That just happens in real life on my desk. I mean, you can see the corners of some Post-its curling up, and then I know to sort of call that writer and say, "How are you doing?"
Yeah, the Post-its curling up. Do you need the Post-its dying?
Yeah, yeah. Do you need some TLC or what's going on? Hey, whatever works.
Okay, digression over.
And among the manifold pile of Post-it notes, are there writing projects as well you're doing, or is your work it now concentrated?
I've been only editing for a couple of years now. I've been meaning to get back to writing for a couple of years now, but it's always just sort of, I haven't quite gotten around to it.
Could you explain a little bit more how Businessweek fits into the kind of the wider world of Bloomberg? Like, what role is it fulfilling?
Sure. I mean, first of all, it is a wider world. I mean, Bloomberg is a sprawling company of which the journalism arm is just a part of it. I mean, it's the money that comes in is through financial services. They provide data information to the finance sector, and then journalism is just one of those sort of lanes of information that gets to the people who pay for the Bloomberg terminal. And then Businessweek is just a small part of that journalism operation. So in a sense, it's as simple as we're a weekly magazine. We do everything online, and that's our priority, of course. But we the organizing thing is that we have a weekly perspective on the news, and we can use that to step back. We can use that to really gather people's attention, come out with a cover that focuses all of social media on what we think is our best piece that week. So we're a home for the entire newsroom to come when they've got a story that needs a wider audience, that has been in the reporting works for weeks or months and really needs a bigger canvas for expression. We also work with freelancers and bring us great stories from a lot of different countries. But yeah, it's in its simplest form, it's a weekly showcase for the best of Bloomberg, and also some of our own stuff in terms of freelancers and other contributors.
It sounds like you've got an awful lot of freedom to, with your writers and how long they can take to write pieces, and also with the scope of pieces. How do you see that? Have you experienced sort of resentment within the rest of the organisation for the leeway that you have?
No, I mean, people are. Sometimes I wonder what my colleagues think I do all day, because they might meet 10 deadlines in the time that it takes me to meet one. But I think everyone appreciates that there are multiple ways to tell a story, and multiple audiences. There's one version of journalism for getting information to people who are really closely following a certain stock or a certain economic situation in some country, and a completely different way to do it for for a general audience that, say, I'm thinking of an upcoming story we have about opioids. A lot of people know opioids are a big problem, but they also, can find it difficult to dive into those stories because they're so depressing time and time again. We think we found a very interesting, very specific piece to tell, and we'll have that. I won't talk too much about future projects, but we have a little bit of a different ability to gather and focus attention than other parts of the organization, and there's just a lot of different ways to do journalism, and we just occupy was one extreme of it.
And obviously, you said at the beginning that Bloomberg is a very sprawling business, and this is just one offering. Do you find that the readers who are most faithful to Businessweek are sort of siloed off, or is there sort of a widespread amongst what people want from Bloomberg, of which Businessweek is one part?
I think that's a question that I don't know if any publication can really. The question of who our readers are is really existential. In a certain sense, when you publish a piece, you're just trying to get everyone's attention, and it's and you're just refreshing Twitter and Facebook to see, is this catching fire? Are people coming across? Is it achieving escape velocity and reaching a wider audience? I don't know if any publication can really, with sincerity, say that they have an intense clan of devotees who read everything they do. I mean, the age of completist readers, I think, is probably over. But I don't know. I might be getting afield from your question. There's hopefully people who expect a certain thing from Businessweek, which is really smart business coverage that's well reported, well written, with a little bit of an edge. Hopefully we meet that, but also hopefully we write stuff that people find for the first time every single week.
And to what extent is it an American magazine? To what extent is it an international magazine?
Look, it's the fact of the matter is it's edited out of New York. I mean, the ambition is to be a global magazine, to realize that there are great stories to be told absolutely everywhere. And, Bloomberg has staff in a million different places. There's a certain reality. So it's a global magazine, but there's a certain reality that, a lot of the people that we want to talk to are based in America. But if they are, they also have business interests everywhere. It's definitely our goal to have more global coverage. But yeah, channeling global coverage for often American interests can be a challenge.
And how businessy is it? I'm just looking downstairs at the cover of your latest magazine, which I haven't read the story, but it looked like that was almost a political story, or quite a, much broader than...
we take business as an incredibly broad... Business can be an excuse to write about absolutely anything. And the last story that I wrote was about bank robbers. There's nothing businessy or financial about that story, aside from the fact that they robbed banks and they stole money. But it was a fun story to do. So politics is, without question, squarely in the business, financial, economic realm. What Trump does here or what Steve Bannon will do next, it absolutely affects business. And it's whenever I meet freelancers, I try to tell them, if you haven't been considering pitching Businessweek because you don't think you know enough about business, well, think again. Every story can be a business story. Nearly any profile you want to do, we can figure out a money angle to it and let you do quite a broad range of stories.
And as an American editor working here, how have you seen kind of American magazine process versus British journalism?
It was a surprise when I came out to London how sort of small the British long form scene was. I mean, there's a lot of talent here, but there wasn't there's not as much of it in London as there is in New York or the rest of the state. There just isn't that tradition. So I've had some interesting conversations with people. I don't even know how much time they have, what rates we pay, how much space they can get, and what's expected in terms of the reporting, how much voice they can use. It's been an interesting process learning. It was a little bit different than I expected coming out here.
What did you expect?
I don't know. I think you think of England as this land of letters, and there would be this incredibly robust tradition of just sensational reporter writers.
And there isn't.
And there isn't.
Yeah.
And listening to your podcast and other podcasts, you really, a lot of people make this point. It's referred to here often as American-style long-form journalism, which I think says it all.
Why do you think that is? Do you have a theory?
I might not have a theory. I was thinking about that this morning, knowing that you guys were coming in. I don't know. It's just more of a more of a rollicking tabloid sensibility, and I think less patience. I don't know, maybe less respect for journalism. I mean, I think there's a bit of a feeling when you open up a certain magazine and see a certain byline on a certain topic, you as a reader have been led to put a lot of trust in that. This person has spent probably months and months reporting something, worked with a million layers of editing to really bring out the story in as clear and compelling a way as possible. Whereas if I were to pick up, I don't know, a long piece here, I would just assume that not as much work had been put into it, fewer layers of editing were involved, and that there might be more of a political bias on the part of the writer. Is that fair? I don't know, but I'm just saying that's certainly what me as a reader, those are the thoughts in my head.
So we kind of want to get to kind of the nuts and bolts of what it is that you do.
Sure.
Sort of talk about what goes on behind the post-it steps. So
more post-its.
Yeah, more post-its. I'm obsessed now. So if a writer is listening to this podcast and aspiring to become a name on one of those post-its, how would they pitch to you? What kind of things are you looking for in a pitch? What makes a really arresting pitch to you?
An arresting pitch is one that you feel like you couldn't say no to it if you wanted to. Like there's just a force of nature reporter behind it, and she can't let go of this idea. She has an original insight and a lot of theories about it, a lot of questions that she doesn't have answered and wants to answer through the reporting. So something that seems like that will require a great deal of reporting and then a lot of payoff in terms of what can be observed about a new or novel person or company or trend or crime or whatever the subject is, and will appeal to a lot of people. I mean, in our shop, pitches really have to speak for themselves. We share. A lot of times, writers will send a pitch and then be surprised to get a verdict back within a week. We tend to move pitches into our weekly pitch memo really quickly. And it's not uncommon for a editor to bring a pitch to that meeting and not speak. It's not an advocacy meeting. It's just this came in. Does this pitch stand on its own merits? People aren't in this meeting stumping for stories. The pitch really has to.
Who's in that meeting?
We have a team of about 4 or 5 features editors, and then some other friends in the magazine who sit in. Other people at the magazine who don't literally edit feature copy, but have different roles. So when I was the youngest when I joined up as a features editor in 2014, and I was amazed at how equally anyone's opinion, my know-nothing opinion was counted. It's really just people sitting around a room, reading a pitch, kind of sitting in silence for a beat or two, and then saying, yeah, I'd read that, or I don't know, I think I'd flip past that. Often the discussion isn't any more sophisticated. You just kind of know.
It sounds like that part is very collaborative. Do you think that's a real strength, and do you think that adds to the process, or is just that the way in which you work traditionally? So,
I hope so. I hope it leaves us a little closer to thinking. There's a view of a pitch meeting like that as being where an editor might be the advocate for the writer, but there's also a view of it where you've got to be an advocate for the reader. Do you want this story? And I think it's important to say no to stories that are important but no one would read. You need to come back when you figure out a way to tell that in a way that actually will grab will grab people. But I don't know. That's just our shop. I know a lot of places have things have quite a different setup. I also don't want to make it seem like we just give sort of like instant thumbs up, thumbs down verdicts to everything. There's often a lot of discussion, but it's like meeting someone. You can kind of tell, is there a fizziness to the pitch? Do they have it, or do they not?
And if you're you spoke at the beginning about how, especially for that kind of American style writing, there's a lot of layers of editing and a lot of layers of reporting. Could you talk us through that, how long that might take, how rigorous it is, and what it looks like, as much as you can from both sides?
Sure. So if a story is greenlit, that a reporter or freelancer will work with Typically, there are a lot of exceptions, but typically they'll work with sort of one of our feature editors. Look, the reporting and the writing can take place in a couple of weeks. This one's fast, or it can take months and months. Once a draft is sort of in, and Simon, you and I can talk about just, I think that might have been the longest gestation of any piece I've ever worked on, was your piece about the clerks of the British legal system.
Not helped by the sort of novel-length first draft that I...
What was your first draft? Remind me?
10,000 words.
How much?
10,000 words.
Is that all? I thought it might have been longer. Well, that
said so fondly.
That was an extreme...
Simon is blushing.
That was an extreme length to get in, but you also took the first round of edits with an extreme of sort of patience, and you came back with, I think, a 6,000 word draft.
I think it went
draft
from
number
10
2.
to 5.
10 to 5.
4,
yeah,
something like that.
I remember editing that first draft of yours with like the largest Sharpie, like the fattest Sharpie available. Like it wasn't like little delicate pencil scribblings. It was like huge, whole paragraphs, whole pages, and it was just like keep or cut, like just a 2-word edit, keep or cut. But you did it, and it came back in, and then once we had a draft that everyone really loved, that's unusual because that was an utterly unpegged piece. It had no news value of any kind. It could have run in January, it could have run in
We should just say
August.
for listeners, this was a story that I wrote about barristers' clerks in London that ran in Businessweek earlier this year.
It had no news value. It was merely incredibly fascinating and delightfully written. And it took us a while to slot it because, it's easy to always be, we generally run 3 pieces a week. It's easy to be the 4th most newsy piece, and so you're constantly losing out in terms of getting into the actual print edition. But when we did slot it, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the most popular story online for 2 or 3 weeks running.
Yeah.
Which only a couple times a year does a story repeat as the number one piece, both in terms of hits and just total minutes spent, which is my favorite metric. It shows how deep into a piece people read.
So what Nick is saying diplomatically is once they got through the chaff of the first edit,
the wheat was great.
So one other part of our process that I love, I'm not sure if everyone would be familiar with it, is the way we do top editing, which is once an editor and a writer have really worked on something and feel like it's the best that it can be, and it's in the pipeline, it goes in for a top edit, and that's a read by a colleague who's coming to it totally cold, and it's really like a reader advocate read. And they're reading. Ideally, they send it straight to the copy desk.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to improve. A worst case scenario, they send it back to you and say, well, "Sorry, you're like, I'm not getting it. If you think you've characterized such and such in this way, sorry, it's just not working." And you kind of take it back and work on it some more. I love that read. It's I was describing it to a colleague. It's kind of like telling someone like you love them for the very first time. It's like it's a little scary to sort of move somebody to a top edit, but like you're pretty sure that they're going to love it, so you're willing to take that risk, and it's like the best feeling in the world when they agree. Like you and the writer have really come up with something here, and if they say no, it's devastating. But you need to do it to know is this thing you've got ready? Is it ready for the rest of the world? And then from there we've got great copy editors, and then there's extra layers of social media language writing and more and more. It's a process.
We're going to come back to sort of metrics and social media a little bit later, but first off, the tricky question. How is it, given that these pieces can take a very long time to write and involve a lot of reporting, what are you paying people to do that?
So I was told not to get into specifics about our actual word rate, but I'm happy to say that it's better than competitive. So many places are really struggling. Bloomberg's very secure. We pay really well. We want the best reporting, the best writing, and for anybody who wants to start a business, it's in a long form way. Our doors open to great stories especially from around the world. It'll be we pay quite well, I think, relatively, and
certainly compared to British publications.
Extremely favorably compared to British publications.
And does it vary by writer? Do different writers get different rates, or is it just a standard?
If you've worked with us before and your copy tends to sail through, we can discuss that. But our starting rate is pretty good. There's an expectation that we're getting a lot for it. But on top of our word rate there's that's just for the writing. We also pay for the reporting. You need to go to places. like my first instruction to most freelancers is go, hang up, stop talking to me. Get to the place that you've pitched us about, and get back in touch. It's not spending monopoly money. We've got to be reasonable, but it's just the fact that there is a budget for travel and for actually going to places is fantastic, and
really important if you're going to have those kind of stories.
Yeah, as one of our previous editors used to say, as a writer, reporting sets you free. Great writing is easier when you've done great reporting, and so there's an expectation that you are going to spend a lot of time with the subject of the piece that you're proposing, really spend time in the place that you're, you've got to be there if you want to bring writers into it as well.
Just a couple of sort of nuts and bolts questions following that. How much, on pitch length, what do you think, this is something Kassia and I have discussed internally, what do you think is a good length for a pitch?
We might be shorter than other places. I would say under a page, certainly. There's an expectation that if you're going on for longer than that, you may not be in as complete command of your story as we would, adding on more information isn't necessarily good. It just might show us that you don't know how to focus. So a few very well formed paragraphs that show what you think is going on, what you propose to find, just sense that that you've got a theory of the case, that you're going to bring character, introduce people to characters and show how they think, what the world looks like through their eyes. So we'll take pitches that are several pages long, but that's the exception. I can think of one pitch that was actually longer than the story I proposed to tell. We talk about that one sometimes. I would not recommend that. We've greenlit stories based on one-sentence pitches from internal writers.
And how much of it is written by freelancers?
That's probably going down a little bit. It used to be, I counted once, it used to be about one-third, Businessweek staff writers, Bloomberg writers who were who were sort of taking on a project aside from their day beats, and freelancers. The freelance percentage is probably coming down from a third, but it's still like a pretty valuable source of great stories in the magazine.
And both with your work here at Businessweek and more generally, how do you see yourself combining writing and editing and going forward? Do you see yourself staying on the editing track or wanting to?
I don't think anybody in long-form journalism can have if they're being honest with themselves, can have a career plan longer than 6 months. This is a very, very, very stable place. But the last few weeks especially, all these, Titanic magazine editors and owners have gone on in various ways. I really like what I'm doing. I intend to be doing it for a while, but who knows what things are going to be like next year.
And could we talk about a few of the pieces that you sent over? So firstly, the IBM one. So this is a story from 2014. Is that right? Or was it from a few years ago? 2013,
2014.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. It kind of state of play with IBM piece. How did that come about, and what was that like to do, particularly given that the head of the company wouldn't talk to you?
Right. So this was a piece where the assignment, I didn't pitch that. I was assigned it, and the assignment was, what does IBM do? And this is one of the reasons I love working for Businessweek, is that it's a pretty sophisticated set of business journalists, but we're also realistic about, I don't know, the way regular people talk. And I think there was a real sense, I can't remember whether this was 2013 or 2014. There was a real sense at that point that we had no idea what this major company actually did, and our way of tackling that was not to put have a person who really knew IBM A to Z write about it. They put me on it. I knew nothing about IBM, but I spent a long time talking to a lot of people, asking a lot of really dumb, embarrassing questions, and getting to a place where I actually had an idea. I actually really cherished that whole experience, where there's the instinct to go to somebody who didn't know anything and throw them in to a reporting project and trust them enough to put it on the cover and take the flack that comes from a piece that was, the short answer is that they're not doing great. It was not a flack.
How are they doing now? I didn't look this up, but was it?
At that time, I think the stat was that they'd had 12 straight quarters of sinking revenue, and generally you want revenue to be going up. It's up to 21 quarters. I haven't seen them meaningfully change anything about their their general lack of reason for existence. I think that Watson, for example, is not a product. I think it's a cost center, not a profit center. Anyway, I think that story holds up pretty well, and we'll still see links to it come up on Twitter.
A pet question here. Do you think that sort of editing the pieces that you edit, does you think that makes you a better writer? Does that inform the way that you write and the way that you pitch and all the rest of it?
No question. I mentioned my mom earlier. She ended her career at the Washington Post as the travel editor, and she always made herself write a couple of stories per year, and she hated every minute of it. But she thought it was really, really important to, not just for her to sharpen her skills as a writer and an editor, both. It absolutely sharpens. But also just to remember what writers go through and the agony of staring at that blinking cursor, and just keeping yourself in a psychological proximity to your writer. So I thought that was very humane. I should absolutely. I need to write more. I got to get my own name on a Post-it note.
On your own Post-it note.
Yeah.
Cassia can supply you with several Post-it notes if you need.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of all manner of stationery. Back to some pieces that you have shepherded and edited. Simon, I know, read and really enjoyed one of your pieces about Instagram, and I loved the piece about the FBI informant. We're definitely going to link to both of those in the show notes. I just thought that the FBI piece was just, what a fascinating character. Can you talk a little bit more about that piece?
Sure. So this is a piece where, was the headline of that? The rogue informant? Sometimes the note, the sort of the slug we've got in our internal workflow ends up being the headline of the piece. It might have been the rogue informant. The writer, Zeke Fox, is an absolute gem, and he's a really good example of somebody who is sort of crushing it for Bloomberg all day long, all week long, and then he will come to us every now and then. He'll kind of amble downstairs and say, "Well, I've come across something that's a bigger story." He's found these really fascinating characters on what we call like sort of the shady side of Wall Street. So loan sharks and other kind of people who just aren't on the they're not on the white shoe side. This story was about a guy who became an informant for the FBI investigating white collar crime, who got fed up with being a double agent sort of going between his friends in the sort of shady world of finance and the FBI, and he became a triple agent. He started recording his meetings with the FBI because he was unhappy with the way he was being handled. And he had these sort of I don't want to say delusions of grandeur, because the story was actually kind of grand, but he had this incredible story to tell. Zeke told it extremely well, where you're not really sure as you're reading what's going to happen next. The ending is very satisfying. More and more of Zeke's pieces get nibbles from Hollywood. But I'm sorry, what was the question about that?
I just wanted you to sort of talk about it, but I think that was sort of the perfect answer, because it is a complete page-turning story. So for you to get lost in your answer is perfect.
Zeke is really there's nobody else quite like him in terms of what he brings us. And a few other he has editors on the Bloomberg News side of things, including Robert Friedman, who developed all these ideas with him, and there are other of my colleagues who work on them on the magazine side as well. But Zeke really is an expert at sort of figuring out when his stories always involve a character you can't quite believe is real, and it also sort of secretly teaches you about the way finance works. It's like wrapping a pill in peanut butter when you would give it to a dog or something. It's like secretly, or putting Velveeta on broccoli. It's like you come away from the story not realizing that you are now immensely smarter about the way that merchant cash advance works, or death spiral financing, or how is it that the FBI gets these financial fraud cases that it sort of trumpets and never really mentions how they get them.
And that in itself is quite sort of shady. He is a sympathetic character, because you do feel that he is justified.
Zeke's next project is also going to be great. I can't say too much about it, but just it has elements of. It's basically a Zeke Fox story featuring a Liam Neeson character. So I'll sort of hopefully that tantalizes.
We'll wait for the movie.
Yeah.
And is that kind of page turner, really sort of immersive style something that you aim for, to have that kind of more enduring kind of style of story?
Well, yeah. Ideally, there's another piece that if people are interested in, I would love for them to check out. Is a piece about a a fake hijacking, this elaborately staged hijacking of an oil tanker worth $100 million in the water between Somalia and Yemen a couple of years ago, and just how this, I mean, probably the most spectacular shipping fraud in shipping history, which is to say human history, and there are unsolved murders and just incredibly just incredibly dramatic events, and it's all real. The reporting effort on that story, and if anyone's listening, maybe there's a link in the show notes. You can Google the hijacking of the Brillante Virtuoso. There's an insane. There's about a year of reporting by two reporters, that also involving Bloomberg staffers in Manila, translating in Tagalog in real time with people. I mean, like it was a real exhibition of the resources on offer here. There's a big news value in that piece, but the dramatic value was also pretty high. And so that was one where we said we need 6,000 or 7,000 words to tell this story, and the web people can put together a bit of a special package for presentation. Not every story is going to be sort of an aspiring screenplay like that, but every so often we really want to do one of those.
And can we talk a bit about the Instagram piece, which I loved? And for those who haven't read it, again, we'll put it in the notes. It's about getting a writer to spend a month, was it, to try and become an influencer on Instagram. And I was interested reading that about, it's a kind of stunt piece, taking the writer to go and do something and doing that within the kind of bounds of a kind of grown-up magazine. How did that... I like the line about the conversation with his editor and a slightly baffled Bloomberg lawyer.
So this piece was... it wasn't just any writer trying to become a glamorous influencer on Instagram. It was like as he described himself, just like a guy, like a schlubby kind of guy. He's got a 1 or 2 year old daughter. He's not at his most... his self-grooming might not be at its lifetime peak.
Was he a staffer? Or
Yeah, Max Jafkin. He's an incredibly talented reporter and writer who's on staff. He'll do an amazingly reported piece about a big target, Apple, Uber, but also is a very funny guy and had this idea: can I Max become a sort of glossy, sort of soft focus Instagram star, with lots of pictures of lattes and sort of like...
Which he bought en masse, right? He bulk purchased.
So he went into sort of the dark arts of buying followers. And then the idea was, in a month's time, can I get somebody to pay me to be me? And I don't want to give the story away, but basically he has some success where he goes from zero to influencer, and actually he finds that even he was able to sort of cultivate out of nothing a sort of a following. He used some illicit means to get real momentum, and the newsroom lawyer had some questions about how exactly this was all going to work.
It's a great piece.
I think it's good that we've ended on a sort of social media note, because I'd really like to know a bit more about what a successful story looks like for you in terms of once you've pressed publish, what are you hoping for?
Right. Think about that a lot. And you just want it to... There's no really good answer anymore. You want it to be blowing up Twitter, blowing up Facebook. You want to make these sort of, really thoughtful, curated weekly, long read roundup emails. There are times when a piece of ours will be in all of those lists. And I consider that kind of like, hitting for the cycle. That's very satisfying. It's also really frustrating if you're trying to think of, if you're really writing for an audience of just a couple of individuals. You can get lost in the internal stats engine, looking at total minutes spent, looking at referral sources. I don't know. You just kind of know when a piece has really achieved escape velocity, and you've got people screen grabbing certain sentences, certain paragraphs on Twitter, and just and just sort of losing their mind over it. That's the ideal. That's from like a writing perspective. From a news perspective, you also have pieces where you are looking for results that are much bigger than just doing well on social media. You're looking for a congressman or a senator to brandish one of your stories in a live hearing on the Hill, which is when that happens. Here I'm thinking of a story about a GM whistleblower. That's a pretty big thrill. So there's different ways to feel like you've really done right by a story.
You've mentioned the metrics that you have access to a couple of times now, not least the wonderful metric of how long someone spends on a great piece like Simon's. But can you tell us a little bit more about what you have access
Nick
to?
was the person who spent most time on that piece, I should say.
I just left one browser window open. In comparing notes with people who have my job at other places, I think it seems like everybody has their own version of this, an internal system where you can just lose yourself, trying to measure different stories and run reports. So, I'm not sure that there's no perfect metric. One I would love to see, and it probably exists, I probably just don't know how to access it, is figuring out what line of a story people stop reading on a certain extract. But and hopefully you can use that information to sort of remind yourself that not everyone is consuming your story as from absolute first word to last word, and you can get hopefully better at building stories that people do take through all the way to the end. But I don't know. A lot of times though, you can also be really, really proud of a piece that for whatever reason doesn't melt down the server, and you can just be happy with it as a piece of writing or as a piece of reporting. And not everything can be a home run.
I think that pretty much wraps it up from us.
I think it does.
Thank you for a really fascinating interview.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. This has been great.
We hope you enjoyed that. Now, a brief update from our lives. Simon?
I have been wrestling with my book manuscript, which has been grueling as ever, but I feel I'm in a slightly better position than before. And also, excitingly, my big piece for Outside Magazine ran, so I've been basking in the feedback. Kassia, what about you?
I binge-watched the entire second series of Stranger Things for review for The Economist, and I've got another film review lined up for them. And then in bigger news, I'm also still wrestling with my book manuscript, which will hopefully be published any month now. And The Secret Lives of Colour Without the U was published in America.
Congratulations to Kassia.
Thank you very much. It got turned into a BuzzFeed listicle.
Amazing.
I've made it. Anyway, this has been Always Take Notes, hosted by me, Kassia Sinclair.
And me, Simon Acombe. Our producers are Olivia Krellin, Ed Kiernan and Liz Davies.
Music is by Jess Danheiser. Our social media is by Zara Hankier. And our graphic design is by James Edgar.
And we're on all the social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. Well, all the ones that matter. On Facebook and Instagram at Always Take Notes. On Twitter at Take Notes Always. And our website is alwaystakenotes.com.
And as ever, please do leave us a review on iTunes. It really helps, and most people, but not all, have found it a seamless and easy process. Thank you very much.
Bye.